This is Will County's News Talk Sports 1340 WJOL. It's a Wednesday afternoon, just after 12 o'clock. It's time for Policy Nuance, brought to you by State Representative Mark Batinick from the 97th District. On the show today, we're going to be talking about election debate. We're going to be talking about the parental notification repeal. We're going to be hearing comments from Mr. Batinick when he was on the floor in Springfield, Virginia elections, and a major announcement from the man sitting to my right.
That's correct.
Mr. Mark Batinick. I had to make sure I hold my hands
literally and figuratively?
Literally. To my right, to Mark Batinick. How you doing there, sir?
I'm doing great. Yeah, and this is it's a sad day. It's our last show.
It is. We had a nice little run here.
Nice little run. We got through a lot of stuff, and it was the end of. It's kind of fitting. It was the end of veto session. This past week. So obviously, all those things happened during veto session. Normal stuff we like to go through. COVID still good, right? We're kind of at a valley, kind of flattening out here, but we've definitely come down a long way. It'll be interesting to see what happens with everything, with the weather changing and whatnot. But I think the theme for the week so far is COVID good, bears bad. is kind of where I am. So I'm the governor has alluded to once again what he's going to do on the mask. We'll see. I wish we had public hearings on that. We did kind of sort of have our first bill that we voted on that tangentially dealt with COVID, although not directly. So so we're going to talk about that.
Can we get the masks before Thanksgiving? Can we take them off before then or not?
I'm unsure. I'm just asking for metrics. I'm just asking for somebody to tell me what the goalpost is. But the honest to goodness good part is that we're really in great shape in terms of where our terms of where our numbers are, and even the epidemiologists that are ultra conservative are saying that this is maybe by spring it's really going to fade out and turn into something a little bit more less deadly and seasonal. So
good.
So we'll see. But the big news yesterday was I had Virginia when I was typing this to you yesterday, this email of the outline of the show, and it ended up being Virginia and New Jersey. Not that the New Jersey governorship is going to flip, but it was still quite a big story.
Yeah, as of the airing of the show right now, I think about 700 vote difference, but most of the votes that are out are in Camden and Newark, which is blue. So he probably won't win, Jack, if you will, because nobody can pronounce his last name. But, man, that was every bit as big a statement as Virginia was.
Oh, I would say in many ways it was a bigger statement. I saw a tweet this morning. It compared the 2016 and 2020 presidential results to New Jersey and Illinois, and they're almost identical.
Wow. So
if a state like New Jersey that has almost kind of would match, at least in those two elections, an identical electorate to what Illinois has, it tells you what might be happening here, and we're seeing it, and that's some of the stuff that we're going to get into today. Is some of the speeches that I talked about is just there's a big parental pushback. I mean, if you look, we had the anti-police bill lost in Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. The lieutenant governor, Winsome Sears.
What a story!
What a story! What a speech! What a story! And this is something that I hope we get to see moving forward. Is less of a she really pushed that stop dividing us thing. And it's somebody like her that can really carry that message. So
a Jamaican-born American citizen Marine.
Marine, exactly. Jamaican-born, chose to, she signed up for the Marines, right? To fight for not her home country. And now she's lieutenant governor, I believe she's the first black female at any statewide office in Virginia. Somebody might want to Google that, but
I wouldn't be surprised.
But probably certainly as lieutenant governor. And then even you had some other ones like Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, mm-hmm. which was great. Another woman of color. But Virginia was really about. Got to tell you, it was about parents' rights. It was about education, and we were talking right before as your music was playing. I'm interested to know how some of those votes during veto session would have gone if they would have been taken after everybody saw what happened in Virginia and New Jersey. Mm-hmm. Because I've been frustrated about this on the last couple of shows. The first thing we're going to hit is the parental notification issue. I just don't think people are listening with votes like that they're listening to what the public wants. And you see what happened in Virginia and what the backlash was, and the things that what I know about Virginia. And I'm obviously not astute at Virginia politics, but I didn't hear about kind of the very fringe sort of policies that were being put on the board for votes or passing in Virginia. We're way to the left of them in terms of the types of policies that have been passed out of Springfield lately. So I wonder if it would have been a little bit of a wake up call, or if those votes would have been called had the results for Virginia been, or if veto session would be this week instead of last week, would be interesting to see.
It's a good question because, like I said today, Mama Bear got poked, and she got mad because people were telling them what to do with their kids, that they're going to be in control. That's where McAuliffe lost. We still would be having this conversation if McAuliffe didn't say 4 weeks ago, parents, stay out of the education, leave it to the professionals. Basically, I'm paraphrasing. He probably would have won, but it still would have been like New Jersey, or it would have been a huge wake-up call, because that was the worst thing any politician has ever said during a campaign. Mom and Dad, moms, you don't know what you're doing. I got this.
Yeah, and independents went 19 points for Biden just a year ago, and they swung the other way for the Republican. And it's policies, and it's policies like the parental notification repeal, which I'm still I get really upset at times, and sometimes I'm just kind of reserved and sad. I'm not really sure the emotions to go through, but one of the people that spoke for the bill, so for everybody that's listened for the first time, parental notification was simply not consent, but notification of a parent if a minor child, I mean, we're talking in some cases a 10, 12, 14-year-old child is going to have an abortion. Not consent, but that the parent would have to be notified. And I believe it's a 48 or 72-hour notice. So not consent, but just the parent would be notified. And one of the arguments that somebody who supported the bill stated was that there's some horrific situations, and this may be true, where parents are actually sex trafficking their own kids.
Understand that.
Horrible. So tell me how repealing this helps that child. Because now somebody would either notice that the girl was pregnant, or she would have to go to a court or go to somebody different to say, hey, this happened to me, and there's a path out.
Sure. What's
happening now with the repeal of this is these situations are going to be kept in the dark, and I haven't had anybody explain to me, and I'm still willing to listen. I haven't had anybody explain to me how this protects a girl that is in the situation that was just outlined during floor debate. And then I'm going to read you another quote.
I think it kind of does the opposite, because now the kid can go in, and mom and dad, the abuser, doesn't need to be with them. And maybe they say something, the healthcare professional notices a change of behavior. Maybe they're blushing, and they can tell that they're lying or something like that. Then maybe they can alert officials. But now the parent doesn't even have to be there.
Right. I mean, I don't understand it. So this is a quote from the governor. He said, reasons for supporting the repeal. Well, the reasons why girls are afraid to tell their parents are frightening. I mean, physical abuse, rape, incest. And there is a certain percentage of minors that fit into this category. If we do not protect them by getting passage of the P&A repeal, we would see continued back alley abortions and serious potential illness and death. Now, my question to you is, we were just talking about a shooting here in Joliet, right? We had Paul Vallis on talking about shootings in the city. I don't remember the exact increase in opioid overdoses this last year in 2020, but it was large, right? We've talked about kids being shot in the city. We've reported on all that stuff. I got a question for you, because you're the news guy. How many continued back alley abortions and serious potential illnesses and death have happened that you've reported on in the last 8 years since this was a law?
None.
Maybe the governor should stop making up a fake boogeyman and dividing us, and actually start dealing with the issues that are facing the state, like the increase in opioids, like the increase in suicides, like all the things that we haven't been talking about during the pandemic that the medications have caused. If it's other countries are actually taking even steps towards saying, hey, you're better off eating better to protect yourself from COVID, right? There's actual pro-nutrition campaigns that are happening in other countries. But he makes a false boogeyman to get this to pass. It's not happening. If somebody wants to send me an email and show me the cases where all these things have happened in the last 8 years, please let me know. But let's go to the first part of what he said. He said, girls are afraid to tell their parents because there's physical abuse, rape, and incest. don't we want the girls to tell their parents if something bad's happening to them?
Right.
Do we just want these people, these girls, young girls, kept in the dark? I'm blown away, and I'm telling you, this push would not have happened if Virginia would have happened a week prior.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that.
A little bit of a wake-up call.
This is a huge wake-up.
I went off on my show whenever it was, I think the vote came Wednesday or Thursday. I went off and asked anyone who voted yes, free, open invitation, come on, I won't argue with you, tell me why you voted yes. I said local reps and national reps and crickets. I didn't hear a thing from anyone. That really bothers me because I lose respect for people when they won't stand up for what they believe in, and they apparently believed in this enough to vote yes for it. So you know what? Have a backbone and a spine to tell us why. Because our listeners are ticked off. They want me to post every yes vote and every no vote, and I haven't gotten around to it because of the shootings this week, but I'm still going to do that. They need to be held accountable for decisions like this.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to be a pretty big crack in the armor for anybody who either voted for this bill or signed this bill. So it was one of the we went back into the leader's office is right behind the chambers. And I'm obviously floor leader, and we were kind of shaking our heads. And there's times where you see, and there's a vote we're going to talk about that was less consequential, where we say, wow, these people really put themselves in a difficult situation politically. This wasn't one of those bills. This was like the decriminalization of fentanyl bill, where I didn't want it to become law because it's bad policy. No matter what the political gain is, that's not the point of why we're down in Springfield. We're down in Springfield to make sure that good policies pass. And quite frankly, if the other party, if the majority party is going to pass good policy time in and time out, I'm on board with that.
Let's go. Absolutely.
Let's go. Let's do it. And we're never going to agree on everything 100% of the time. But this was. There's been a few really, really bad votes for me over my nearly 8 years here, and that was towards the top or bottom, however you look at it. So. Anyway, so that was. Here's what we did. I'm going to give a little credit to Patrick Windhorst, who a former state's attorney that's a rep in Southern Illinois, and he certainly helps me a lot with certain things in Florida debate. He said this week there were votes to remove parents' rights. There were votes to remove religious rights, and this one's going to blow you away. There was literally a vote to restore voting rights to people currently incarcerated in prison. Everybody, rapists, murderers, tax frauds, white-collar crimes, all of them. There was a vote on the board to restore rights to those people. So those are the kind of things that we're going to be unfortunately ferreting through today. So the next thing, if we have a chance to move the clip, was the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, and I probably my speech here kind of tease it up.
Okay,
as best I can.
Let's listen. This was you on the floor last week?
Yes.
Okay, let's listen in.
Hey, Representative, I think I started the day when we took roll by saying today, October 27th, is actually National Cranky Coworker Day. I think some of us are getting cranky here. But I wanted to clarify a couple things you stated. I think you stated that the medical community is clear on these issues. Is that correct? Earlier?
On mitigations?
Yes.
Pretty clear.
Okay. What does the CDC recommend on masking? I might know a little bit about masking, by the way. I get lots of emails on it. Some of them aren't too happy with me, but what does the CDC recommend on masking? Ages 2 and up, right?
Yes.
Okay, what does the World Health Organization recommend on masking?
I'm assuming the same.
No, they're not. It's 12 and up. Other countries, if you've had COVID, you get 1 shot. In our country, if you're 12, you get 2 shots. Other countries for kids, they're doing 1 shot.
I don't know which vaccines they're using in other countries.
Well, they're using Pfizer. They're using some of them. But the point is pretty clear. We can simply go back to the masks, that the medical community is anything but clear on this issue. Let me ask you another question.
In this country,
Do you think a 6-year-old is better served by getting COVID naturally when they're much less at risk at it, as opposed to getting a vaccine and not getting the full immunity for it that might affect them for the rest of their life? How do you feel on that?
I'm not a doctor.
You're right, and we're voting on this bill. I'm going to go to the bill. The medical community is anything but clear on this. This isn't about this bill. There were 50,000 witness slips filed because we haven't done our job for 20 months debating all these nuances.
I talked about it in a press conference last week. My wife teaches a kindergartner that's forced to wear a mask that has autism, and it is not in the best interest for that child in that situation to be wearing that. But we have refused for nearly 2 years to do our jobs. Things aren't black and white, and people back home are hanging on to this bill. They're hanging on to this act because we're not acting. They can't come to us. You guys have to say the same thing. Well, it's the governor's executive order. We're not debating it. That's what this is about. The people that are upset at school board meetings, the people that file the witness slips, the people that are going into places that I wouldn't go would be less upset if their legislators, the people whose office they can go into and talk to, were actually having very clear debates on these nuanced situations. But we want to do a one-size-fits-all, and this is the last hope they have. Let's not take that last hope that these people have, and let's vote no on this bill. Thank you.
It's interesting. That's one of those clips where sometimes people read into it kind of what they want. I had somebody reach out to me with a message complaining that I was anti-vaccine, which clearly I'm not.
Clearly, you've said it from the day one.
Yeah, I did 2 radio shows on it, right? I certainly support the vaccine, and we even talked about the data for pregnant women. The issue is it's not clear whether this is actually beneficial for kids. Now, I actually had a doctor's appointment two days ago, and I asked him about it, very much pro-vaccine. What he said is that his concern for kids is that they're vectors, right? That they can – so we're not doing it necessarily in his eyes to help them, but they can carry it and then give it to somebody else. Let's have conversations on this.
Sure.
Let's talk about myocarditis, but also more importantly, what I would say, let's talk about – I really want to know if it's not harmful for the kid – and you're just concerned, we'll use my doctor's idea of the vectors. Is there a downside to taking the vaccine, which now studies are showing it doesn't have the durability of immunity that getting it naturally does, right? So if a 6-year-old gets it naturally, what's going to happen 10 years from now, as opposed to, is he going to be chasing the vaccine for the rest of his life? Or if somebody gets it naturally, is it something where they're going to have a bigger natural immunity? The answer, we don't know. Right. And what I don't like is the idea that somehow somebody who clearly hasn't even looked at the basic issue on this, passing legislation that acts as if it is clear. Because it's not clear, and once again, I'll go back to Virginia. It's a parents' rights thing. It's clear that people with comorbidities, that it's very important. The data shows me that it's very important to
get the shot
for kids to get, for people to get the shot, and then possibly even kids. But I think there's a little bit of an open debate, and the idea that this stuff is kind of just being rammed down our throat is what the backlash is, and that's why you have people really upset at school board meetings and people really upset at state reps and other people. And the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act was kind of a bill that maybe wasn't meant to be used for what they were using it for, but it was the last thing that they had. And I don't think this would have came up if we would have had a more thoughtful debate on all these things. So my biggest concern is if the governor does, without hearings, the same thing that Newsom did in California and mandates it for school kids. I don't think we've had enough transparent enough of a public debate. There are plenty of parents. Yeah. There are plenty of parents who just want to go ahead and do it. And I was talking to one yesterday. They want to get it for their kids. Fine. God bless you. Your choice. You do it. But I can also understand, looking at the data, that there's a rational argument to be made for kids not doing it. And to me, that's what that debate was about.
I don't think he will, though, because he hasn't mandated for state workers yet either. Right.
Well, but he's because of the union, so he's working with the unions to do a mandate, and this was part of it, because this kind of takes away the the ability for people to have an opt out. Now, to be clear, look, I've had people that told me that they don't even want to do the spit test, which I'm like, come on. Do the spit test, right? Like the people that don't want to get tested. Like, if you don't want to take the vaccine and you want to get tested, that's fine, but you don't want to get tested. I don't have a rational argument for you on protecting that,
right?
Your choice there. So
I get that. Yeah,
there was. I think there was a record number of witness slips. There was 50,000 people who signed in opposition to that bill. Actually, more than the P&A bill. And I believe that 50,000 was a record, and I believe the governor called them bots. And I can assure you, based on the number of emails that I got from my district and the number of calls I had, that they weren't bots. So yeah, it was definitely another interesting interesting debate. So we covered taking away parents' rights, taking away religious rights, which was the healthcare right of conscience, is kind of what they were alluding to there. The next part is, and there's a little bit of this next clip, is the our election debate, and I definitely want to get into the details more after we play this clip.
I've talked a little bit about this before, but I want to give a little bit more of a history. We talk about voter suppression, and I think one of the previous speakers spoke pretty well that whenever there's an election law change, it seems to favor Democrat constituencies. When we first passed vote by mail years ago, or same-day voter registration, in an urban area, you can walk to any precinct and do same-day voter registration, but in a rural area, you potentially had to drive to the clerk's office to do same-day voter registration. That is a soft way of denying Republicans the same fair voting that Democrats get. We passed 2 hours for high schoolers to get out of school to vote. When they have 40 days to vote by mail, they can vote before school, after school. They can vote early, all kinds of options. My guess, if there was polling that showed that high schoolers were more likely to vote Republican, we wouldn't give them a free pass out of high school to go ahead and vote. When we passed absentee ballot applications because of the pandemic, you picked a Democratic wave year of 2018 to say we're only going to mail it to voters who voted in 2018. When we did automatic voter registration, certain welfare things, unemployment checks, you're automatically registered to vote. But by golly, if you get a FOID card or a CCL and they do a background check on you and they know where you live, you're not automatically registered to vote. I wonder why that is. Why aren't we passing bills that, hey, in rural areas, you don't have to live, you have to be, there has to be enough polling locations so people don't have to drive past a certain amount of time to get to a polling location? Why are we putting polling locations in jails but not in public hospitals? I think we all know the answer to that. There's a clear reason. If people were serious about expanding voter access for everyone, not just for the favored constituencies, you'd see something like my House Bill 4137, the concepts in this bill. But it's not, because you don't want somebody who gets their FOID card or their CCL automatically registered to vote because you don't think they'd vote their way. And if 2018 was a wave Republican year, I'm guessing you would have gone back a little bit farther with your vote by mail application laws. That's why we're wary about bills like this. As one of the previous speakers said, you're changing the law on how we vote, how we fund certain elections right off the heels of a Democrat losing an election. Vote no.
So,
wow. Let's go back to that first point. All good points, but the first one you made about 18, and so they only sent ballots out to those who voted in 18?
It was only required by law. And this was actually something they gave Lauren Staley Ferry credit for, because she said, I'm going to mail them out to everybody that's registered to vote. And that was one of the first times leading up to my 2020 election where some people on my side were freaking out about that change that was done here locally. And I was like, well, at least that's fair. At least I can make a policy argument that is fair, as opposed to just mailing it out statewide. So all that was required by the law was to mail out absentee ballots to people who voted in 18.
Okay.
And then they're nipping at the edges all the time. So like I said in the clip, in 2014, I actually think Tom Cross probably lost his election because when they first made same-day voter registration, so we can register on Election Day, in very populated counties, you could walk to any polling location, get registered to vote, and vote. But in rural counties, you had to drive to the clerk's office, which in some cases that might be a 20, 30 minute. So it's not real easy to round up a dozen people and do same-day voter registration in Shelbyville, let's say, versus Cook County somewhere, right? So Tom had the lead on election night and then ended up losing by 20,000 votes. And that might have been a vote that the election, let's just put it this way, the election laws weren't equal throughout the state. And if you're going to do it that way, they have to be equal throughout the state. So what they passed in veto session this time, they literally passed legislation that changed how Supreme Court races are funded. So what happened? We've never had a Supreme Court, to my knowledge, never had a Supreme Court justice not retained.
Right.
But Justice Kilroy was the first one to lose.
He was.
He was somebody who blocked fair maps, think he voted against term limits as well, but it was, and it's a 4-3. He was the balance of power in the Supreme Court, and he lost his election. Well, now you have you have 2 seats up that'll determine the balance of power for the Supreme Court. Well, they didn't like the way the last election came out, so they changed the law on how Supreme Court races can be funded, and it may affect this Supreme Court race. So what's happening is, and you're seeing this throughout the country, where it's not about, people want to get stuck on voting machines and the internet and all this other kind of stuff. I don't like when people use the laws and tweak the laws to favor their party, whether it be gerrymandering, whether it be certain rules, whether it be all the stuff that I outlined in the speech. And I mean, the next one that just blows me away is the last thing, and it got 57 votes. So to give you an idea, it was 3 votes from passing. A bill came on the board, and a majority of the majority party voted for it. A bill came on the board to allow people in prison, currently in prison, so not in jail. So in jail, we've already passed legislation where county jails can be a polling location. So if you're awaiting trial, you get a DUI. One of the stories I've always talked about, if somebody blows a red light, puts 4 people in, hits a minivan, puts 4 people in the hospital, he gets taken to a polling location now, and the 4 people in the minivan get taken to the hospital. Right? How's that fair? But he's awaiting trial. They wanted to pass legislation that actually made it legal for people in jail to vote. Murder, rapist, white-collar crimes, whatever it is, they wanted to give the rights for those people to vote. And I don't understand it.
I don't either. And thank goodness it didn't pass.
Yeah.
But it came close.
57 votes. And
what was the rationale? I mean, what was the argument for?
The argument for is we're trying to get these people reacclimated to society, was basically the argument that I got for
That's
it.
great, but once you get out, then knock your socks off.
And there might be other other steps as well. So,
oh Lord,
obviously they're not going to do the Republicans tend to be the tough on crime. If you have the ability, then if you have a party that's, we voted for a lot of decriminalization laws. We had bills this past session that would do things well. If I was put in jail for this, and it was plea bargained down to something, but that new thing it was plea bargained down has a lesser penalty, that maybe that person then would be let out of jail. So there's and look, there may need to be a rebalancing of who goes to jail, how, and why. But we need to look at these things in a more thoughtful way. So,
yeah.
But on to the big news.
Big news. We haven't covered all the big news.
We have not covered all the big news.
We haven't. All right. There's more big news, and I think this is going to answer my tease earlier this morning. Major announcement. Yes,
major announcement. It has been an absolute honor to represent the 97th District. I've been self-employed since I left college. I went from being my own boss to having what grew to be about 120,000 bosses, and I always looked at it that way. But I tweeted a picture of the show that apparently not everybody remembers called 8 is Enough. And I'll at the end of this term, it'll be 8 years, and that's going to be it for me in the House of Representatives in Springfield. So I intend to finish out the rest of my term, and it's time. It's time. So no more House of Representatives. You're not going to run for Senate or for Congress or anything else like that. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not. I would have a much better plan if I was planning on doing anything like that. I'll never slam the door on anything. You usually do the announcement for the new thing before you announce you're leaving the old thing, right? But no, honestly, it's been an honor. And I was talking to somebody coming in. I think everybody should at least at some point either run for office themselves, no matter what it is, or volunteer for a campaign or get involved, because it really helps you learn about our democracy and how precious it is and how much each individual person matters and how big of a difference you can make. I mean, I have a lot of people that think, I'll start with my volunteers, the election in 2018, I won by 590 votes. Wow. And I look at, I wouldn't be here without the volunteers that helped me on all sorts of things along the way. We have a lot of volunteers that just work on the official side with helping with events and kids fairs and reaching out to people and doing things like that, whether we're doing a FAFSA event or anything like that. So big thanks to the volunteers. Big thanks to Jim Durkin for trusting me to be floor leader, which was something that
it's a big deal.
I was confident I was going to despise, but actually secretly have grown to really enjoy. And then the rest of the caucus. This especially these 2 years, we've got a really good caucus down in Springfield on the Republican side. Really good teammates that help out a lot. I think we're all rowing in the right direction. Staff, again, I got to give a big shout out to Debbie Krolitis. We didn't always agree on policy. We went at it oftentimes, but probably the greatest thing she deserves credit for was with COVID when we started the Helping Hands program, which we actually started that before schools were closed. I mean, we were really on the front end of that one, and she's the one that quarterbacked that. It was my idea.
But she ran with it,
and she ran with it. And that's a perfect example of the volunteers. I mean, we put out a Facebook message calling for volunteers, and we literally had more people volunteer in the 97th district than we had seniors in need to have people go shopping for them and do things like that. And she quarterbacked that, and that was just absolutely tremendous. And then obviously the biggest one I have to thank. I talk about my wife a lot on the show. And she actually said to me last night, she looked over, she's like, "Are you sure about this?"
Yeah, really?
And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sure about it." But she's been just wonderfully supportive because obviously it's not easy. I'm gone in Springfield a lot. I guess at this point, by year 8, the millions of dollars of negative ads that are either not true or out of context or whatever, I guess we kind of grew numb to that. They almost became funny. But she certainly, while I was in Springfield doing things, I got to meet a president. I got to have dinner at the mansion. Well, I got to do. It's a hard job if you do it right. She was the one that was just supporting me all the way along and supporting me even last night. So
you just told her last night?
Well, we've been talking about it.
Okay,
but she told me she said to me last night, she's like, "Are you sure?"
She knew you were coming in today. Okay,
yeah, she knew I was coming in today. So, and it's there was no one particular thing. It kind of.
Well, let me ask. So the maps, they're not official yet.
Correct.
Okay, but handwriting's on the wall. The Dems are going to, again, nip away at these districts, as you referred to, nipping away at certain rules and regulations and laws earlier. Were they going to make it very difficult on you and your family to run again?
Yeah, no, that certainly was about it. I mean,
okay.
I've certainly, I guess I don't want to necessarily, I've overcome much more difficult elections than whatever this one was going to be.
Okay.
Right? So I would probably say my most difficult election was 18. I've, in fact, a couple of things that I don't know too many people, if any, that have won 3 Tier 1 elections against Team Madigan in the span of 6 years, which is pretty remarkable. So I was, but at some point, from that standpoint, what do you have left to prove? And I got to do a lot of cool things that I'm proud of, and we'll certainly have a few minutes here to talk about it. But no, it wasn't electorally. It was. I think it's going to be. It'll be if you look at last night, last night was a big recruiting call for people that might.
Sure.
Think opposite of the majority party, especially when you look at some of the policies that they've been pushing out the last couple of years.
Are a couple others, and are you going to handpick a successor, a potential successor?
No. Yeah, I'll make that easy. No.
Okay.
The way to have just handpicked a successor, which is sometimes done, is you get your signatures, you run, you do the primary, and then you step away after the primary and have something kind of mapped out. I didn't want to do that. I'm going to finish my term. I'm going to finish my term strong. I have a lot of things that I want to work on this last year, and I obviously won't be able to get everything done. When you come in as a freshman, you have some really big ideas. We were going to really get pensions taken care of, which I actually did something on Tier 1 pensions, but we're going to do all these things, and I'm proud of a lot of the things that we've done. But most of the last 8 years, frankly, has been playing defense.
Yeah.
But I'm just it's just ready for the next. ready for the next chapter. This chapter's ending, but this is just a chapter in what's your life is a long book, and I've got a lot of options. So no, I'm not gonna make it clear, I'm not gonna handpick a successor.
You will endorse though if somebody you like decides to run?
Yeah, I have endorsed in primaries previously, but I'll have to give that one some thought. This might be more of a situation if there's something obvious, or if there's I haven't been afraid to call out people, whether it be in my party or the other party, like with the former speaker and everything, for standing up and saying, hey, this enough is enough. So it would probably be somewhat of an extreme example, but I honestly haven't given that a whole bunch of thought.
All right, I got one more for you, and then we can just freestyle the rest of the way. What are you going to do then? I mean, this is your job. This is your livelihood. This is your life. You love this life. I know you say you're tired of after 8 years, but I know you'll miss it because this is in your blood. You can just tell with your passion.
Yeah.
What are you going to do, man?
The passion isn't being a state rep. I'd say that's a great question. I appreciate it. The passion is more just always serving and at least having a part of me that serves.
Okay.
So we do the car show at downtown Plainfield, and at 4:00, Tasha Marsaya and some of the other people come out. They put on the orange jackets and they put out the cones and everything like that. I got to tell you, Lions Club, the cone guy at a car show. I always
the cone guy
at whether it be Crossroads Fest in Shorewood or Plainfield Fest or anything like that. I always enjoyed volunteering and helping out with that stuff, and I'm not necessarily closing the book on a political career forever. It might be local, it might be something different several years from now in a different capacity. But I've always been. I think one of the things that made this job easy for me, and I'm not sure if it's the case for everybody, but made this case for me, I was always ready to just step fully back into the private sector. So it certainly made some of the decisions I made and some of the votes I made and things and places that I took. It just wasn't as hard for me to. You
weren't going to be a lifer. You knew you weren't going to be a lifer. Right. She didn't kiss the butt of the ring or of the constituents or anything like that. You did what your district wanted you to do, which is go down and represent them.
Yeah, it's I tell you what, I'll bring up something from this was my freshman year. This was a veto session my freshman year. One of the things that I look back on, because I've been reflecting a little bit, and one of my proudest moments is you're a freshman. It's intimidating. I remember. I'm floor leader now. It took months before I even hit my button to say like the smallest thing on the floor, right? And I had cotton mouth and stuttered when I did it.
Didn't even know if it worked.
Right, exactly. But at the end of my freshman year, it was veto session. It was myself and Tom Morrison. We wrote an op-ed against that ComEd bailout in 2016.
Okay.
And we did some procedural moves where we filed fiscal notes. And then I wrote an op-ed afterwards, and I whipped votes, and I fought hard, and it was a bipartisan bill. And I'm not saying that the entire bill was bad, but I remember we didn't have a budget. We had social services and universities that were screaming for money, but for some reason we were going to find a couple $1 billion to bail out a Fortune 500 company. That's what we were doing during veto session. I was confused. Our stopgap budget was about to end January 1st. And I assumed that we were going to be dealing with the budget. We weren't. We were dealing with this bill, and I remember there just being a lot of lobbyists in the gallery looking down on us. And Tom and I were on a little bit of an island, and we didn't block that bill from passing. However, we did block an immediate effective date. So it needed 71 votes to have an immediate effective date, and it cost ratepayers over $200 million a year. We were able to knock the vote total down so where it passed, but it didn't have an immediate effective date. And I always thought that was going to be the trump card. But I say, we saved ratepayers over $100 million.
That's awesome.
by putting that out. So there's small things like that it for me personally made it easier for me to kind of go out on the ledge. I've obviously I'm anti-vaxxer, and then I'm a mask guy somehow at the same time. But I think some of those decisions it was just, once again, I was just looking at the data, and I wasn't going to be afraid of what I thought was right. And I'm not saying if I think something's right and then I end up being proven wrong, that's fine, and I can admit it, and I can move on. But probably the better way to put it is I wasn't afraid to make mistakes because I was always ready to just go back fully into the into the private sector. And for me, that worked a little bit better for me. And I never looked at it as, okay, I'm going to do this for this many years, and I'm going to do something else for that many years. And there's a lot of good people that are I support term limits, so there's a lot of good people that are down that have been down there for 15, 20 years even. In my perfect world, this isn't personally about some sort of self-imposed term limits. My view on term limits is this. I don't mind somebody who believes in term limits actually serving longer as long as they support what I call retroactive term limits. So I filed a bill that said, okay, I'm going to serve, but I'm going to file retroactive term limits, and anybody who has to finish, if this passes, if they're above this, then they can't run again. And here's the warped thinking on it. If people always term limit themselves out, you're never going to have critical mass to pass term limits, right? Because it's those people are always leaving, and when the term limit person leaves, what do you have? You get a new person in that doesn't have as much influence. Then it's a 50-50 situation if that new person's going to support term limits in the first place, so you can never get to the critical mass. So if you take the policy position, and I think it was, I'm going to give him a shout out here. I think it was Senator Connolly filed this as well, where he said, I'm for term limits, and he had been there a little bit longer. I'm for term limits, but I'm going to make it so that I'm going to stay here and fight for them, and then if they pass, I'll leave, but everybody else has to leave too, so that it's not, one side disarming. So it wasn't a term limit thing, although I believe in term limits and have certainly supported that.
You and maybe when you're all done, we'll have you back. And you can come in during the morning show, and we can talk a little bit about how the Madigan machine worked over all these years. And we probably don't want to spend too much time because you still want to go over some of your accomplishments. But you said earlier that you ran against Mike Madigan, literally handpicked opponent of yours and well-funded, outspending you probably 5-1, 6-1, 10-1.
So the 2 elections ago, I think it was 7-8 to 1.
7-8 to 1.
And this last one wasn't quite as bad, but it was.
So you literally, but what a lot of people don't understand is Madigan's got his people, and he funds their campaign. I mean, funds them, and takes care of them. And they basically work for him even when they're in Springfield, correct?
Yeah, I'll let your words.
Okay, correct. Yeah, that's how it works. And I don't think anybody would deny that. Where does all that money and influence go now? Are these Dems that were part of Team Madigan, are they on their own, so to say? Or is there someone stepping up doing what he did in terms of picking people?
Yeah, so in terms of picking people in election, this will be the first one, so I don't know.
Okay.
But I will say this: it's obvious that it's definitely things are different. And when the speaker left, one of the things that I said, and I think it was on your show, is what's going to happen is the leadership or the majority party is going to make a left turn because it is much more progressive than it had been under Madigan. And Madigan was really good at understanding the politics of bills. And I felt that he would hold back certain bills as much as he could because if he thought it was going to hurt him keeping his majority. That kind of went out the window this session where they said, okay, we're just going to show our cards. So the legislature clearly made a left turn this last election with some of this stuff, whether it be PNA, whether it be I don't think the former speaker would have put a bill on the board to let people in jail. I can't believe that letting a rapist that's incarcerated vote polls very well, right? I don't think he would have done it. So I knew we were going to make a left turn. The question is whether or not the voters make a stand and say, hey, we want a little bit more of a correction and a right turn back. And then obviously the big player in the room now is the governor. The governor is the big person in charge. Although to be frank, both the Senate President Don Harmon and the Speaker of the House Chris Welch have really proven themselves that they're their own person. So it remains to be seen, and we're going to know we're going to know a year from today. Actually, kind of whether the Virginia New Jersey thing was an anomaly or whether it was the start of a wave that went across the middle.
Can Madigan's money, real quick, one last question, Madigan's money be used for campaigns in the future?
I believe it can. I don't know what the exact process is, but
does he still rule over the Democrat Party?
No, he's not. He's not leader of the Democratic Party anymore.
Everything,
and even with this last, there was a little bit of a contention with the map making and where his ward was in what U.S. congressional district. Okay. And my understanding is the 13th ward where he was from kind of lost that battle. So no, I would say it's don't want to.
We'll see.
It's somewhat of a new day, and I don't know how different of a day it's going to be, but it's certainly certainly a new day.
All right,
So.
I want to go through some of your accomplishments. I know you're again, if you're just tuning in, this is Policy Nuance with Mark Batinick, State Representative, 97th District. Made the announcement here just about 20 minutes ago that he's not running for what would have been a fifth term.
Fifth term, yep. Yeah. 8 is enough.
8 is enough. And, the old Dick Van Patten show.
Dick Van Patten. That's who it was.
There you go.
Yeah, and somebody tweeted me, and I don't have them in my phone. I don't know if they're listening or not. They sent me a tweet, a text back that said, "If what I'm thinking is true, here's a picture." And they sent me a picture of the TV show Happy Days, which I thought was pretty funny. So, it's Tier 1 pension reform was, and even talking about pension reform, this is another example. Everybody was, they were afraid to touch something with pensions, but I had a concept that became law about the optional buyout for people at the end of their career where they could turn part of their pensions into a lump sum of cash. And that is set to save the state billions of dollars, and I actually think it can be expanded more. So to have a concept like that become law was certainly pretty cool. I was the first sitting state rep that I know of to stand up, have a formal press conference, and ask for the speaker to step aside as speaker during the whole, with what was coming out during the ComEd scandal. And I'll even go back to the mask things. I'm not a masks now, masks forever, which is what I think some people feel like we're in. But when we were trying to get everything open, I'm proud of, and this was a team thing. I'll bring Nate and Deb and everybody else that helped out and all the volunteers. I think our reaction to COVID, we never closed our office once during COVID, not once. We went there. We had separate offices. We ran the Helping Hands program. We ended up being a staffing agency for, if you think about it, a lot of food banks are run by seniors, right? You have a lot of retired chiefs, right?
Yeah.
So when they started, hey, we need volunteers, so we were able to slide those volunteers in. Meals on Wheels, we're able to have a Rolodex of people to help with that. So I think I've been consistent, which is hard to say, but I've been consistent on COVID and trying to just listen to all sides and let the data work and work as a team to get through this. And we certainly were a little bit more, I don't know how it became so politicized.
Yeah, it sure did.
And I think it would have been less politicized. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm looking at panacea, but I thought it would have been less politicized if at some point the legislator would have been involved and we started getting more people involved and we started having more conversation. Because I brought up in the speech that you played, when you talk about a special needs kid that really needs to be in school, and there are downsides that people will tell you of young kids being masked and learning to read and all that stuff. I just wanted to have those conversations so that we can make an informed decision as to what's right or wrong, as opposed to kind of feeling like everything's, look, if there's one thing we're learning, people really don't like being dictated to in the United States.
Oh, we saw that yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's it. Where people were tired of being told that they're racist. People are tired of telling that they have no business worrying about what their kids are going to do in school. We talked a lot about it on my show this morning, Mark. People are just being told that they're bad, that they're wrong, that a certain insulated group of, quite frankly, elite politicians believe they know best for the entire country, and it's wrong. The middle rose up. Right.
Absolutely. So, I think that while I was always happy to tell somebody and take a text and call and have a conversation about things. And probably the group that I need to thank as well is I really appreciated the people who disagreed with me that reached out to me.
Absolutely.
For a couple of reasons. One, it's nice to get feedback from constituents, but I don't know everything, right? And it's listening, and it's if you have somebody, if you're only listening to the people that are telling you stuff that you agree with,
good job.
You're not learning anything new. And either you would learn to change or tweak, or at some point maybe it was just you didn't explain things well enough and you need to do a better job of reaching out to people and explaining to them. So, but I think that one of my strengths was definitely trying to be out there, not always worried about the next election. And I think that's what helped me carry a district that, frankly, the Democrats carried. Every other Democrat won the districts that made up my state rep seat the last 2 cycles.
Okay.
So there wasn't, whether it be a countywide or a statewide or a congressional candidate, and in some cases I had to do, significantly better than them to eke by. And I certainly appreciate them trusting in me, and if you're listening now, I know you may not always agreed with what I did, but I hope they realize that I was trying to be thoughtful and caring. And I got to tell you, I read those emails, I read the Facebook comments, I try to listen to everybody
Sure.
to get a vibe of what's going on out there. So it's been a wild ride. It's certainly been a wild ride. And I've got I still have stuff on property taxes. We need to do some TIF reform. We need a tax cap of some sort. I've talked in the past on this show about, because so much of schools are funded through property taxes, that there should be a little bit more of a sharing of commercial property tax space, because there's just all these have and have not districts, and flattening that out will certainly, certainly
you
help
see some big corporations in. We have schools in our area, without saying any, that are super, super nice, have all the money in the world because there's a power plant there. And then they get all the money and the other school districts nearby don't.
Right. And leveling that out, everybody should have access to a good public school, right?
Oh, yeah.
We shouldn't have bad ones and super good ones. Everybody should have access to a good public school. Really need to do more on higher education. Senator Rose has talked about having each of the directional schools be more of a center of excellence, where they're like really good at one certain thing, and kind of
it's a good idea. After I'm a parent whose kids both went to school out of state because they didn't find one here that they liked.
Yeah.
And the infrastructure in those schools, Eastern Illinois, God love it. It looks the same today as it did when I went down there to see my friends a long time ago.
Yeah, ditto. I've been there recently, and I went up the road, and we had a lot of friends at Eastern Illinois. And
same cracks in the same sidewalks, buddy.
Same cracks in the same sidewalks. So, pension reform, taxes across the board, the regulatory. I'd like to see us do some more. I'll be working towards my recall amendment that I talked about. So I will certainly have a busy 2022, but in terms of my time in the General Assembly, 2022 will be it.
Wow. I didn't think I'd hear that today.
Yeah.
One person that truly loves it and has a passion for it. I'm sure others do, but you show it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate this venue. This has been awesome.
That's been fun.
The last 2 months and a half have been phenomenal to really get the word out, and we've used a lot of the clips and gotten great feedback. So
good.
Really
good. Any of your guys doing this anywhere else now? They're like, hey, that's a pretty good idea.
I've heard people talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really good idea.
I've heard people talk about it.
All right, if people need to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
We'll still answer your questions at illinoisquestions@gmail.com, or repbatinick.com is our website. I'm on Facebook too, and Twitter and all that stuff.
And I can go down there and really rattle some cages, man, right?
Exactly.
Go kick some butt and take some names.
So I haven't been trying hard enough, is what you're saying there?
That's true. What am I talking about? State Representative Mark Batinick, 97th District. You've been listening to Policy Nuance right here on 1340 WJOL. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.